I'll go ahead and kick us off. We have a lot of people RSVP'd for this webinar today, and so people will probably be coming in over the course of the hour. Uh, and we're super excited to welcome Meredith Walker for the conversation today. We're going to go knee deep into social media and how to approach social media as an artist. Ideally talking, just as a group and having an open dialogue about what you've seen work well as an artist, what questions you have. And Meredith has a presentation to talk about how she approaches social media and how she's kind of harnessed it to grow her business and her brand and her community. I think we all know it's very important, but we all have a lot of questions about how it works. So again, we want this to be a safe space where after Meredith does her presentation, anyone can ask questions to her or also to the group, and we can all learn from one another and again have an open dialogue. So that's kind of the format. And I see people just keep filtering in, which is great. Shavine, while you're here, you want to just say hi quickly?
Hi everyone, I'm a co-founder of Kendall, so welcome everyone today.
Great. Awesome. Thanks. So yeah, if you don't mind muting yourself, that would be great. And then from our team, we have Susan and Lauren and Dari, and I think maybe Lynn as well on the call. So as we go through Meredith's presentation, we'll be kind of answering questions in the chat room. And then again, at the end, we'll have more of a facilitated dialogue altogether. So just feel free to drop in questions as they come up. And then we like to keep the chat rooms active. So if you want to just drop in your name, where you're from, your Instagram or your Cohart profile, that would be great. Maybe some questions that you have about social media or what you're looking forward to diving in here on this call. And we will just kind of kick it off and then, yeah, dive into the Q&A. So Meredith, I'll hand it to you.
Okay.
Then we'll kind of have you start off the conversation for the first 30 minutes or so, and then we'll have a group dialogue at the end. And I'm going to go ahead and pin you, spotlight you. Here we go.
Hello.
Start the
Hello.
show. Awesome. And then do
Everybody.
you have anything
Oh,
else before we dive in, Meredith?
Matrum,
No. Okay, I'm going to have everyone mute
Smatrum.
everyone else. Um, let's see. Do. Cool. We're going to have people coming in as we dive in, but we'll try to keep the conversation to under an hour. Yay. Great. And then, yeah, if you just joined, friendly reminder, just introduce yourself in the chat if you can. And then I'll go back to pinning Meredith. Lauren, do you see Meredith pinned on your side?
yep. Looks good.
Perfect. All right, Meredith. Well, very excited to have you here. So maybe we can just start with a quick introduction before we dive into the presentation, and then go from there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm like really honored that you thought of me for this subject or that, for this focus. So I'm an artist based in Columbia, South Carolina. I have been painting since 2019. I was a graphic designer before that. I went to school at University of South Carolina and worked as a graphic designer for 5 or so years in different sectors, in-house, freelance. And then when I had two daughters, and when I had my second daughter, it was actually my experience with postpartum depression that kind of pointed me to painting. I really just had the desire to like use my hands again after being behind the computer screen for so long. And I kind of forgotten what it felt like to trust my body in the process of creating. And I think just I was kind of tired of this with design. It's really easy to seek perfection. You can get like the perfect angle and everything's so digital. And that was so much pressure for me to know that like perfection could be a goal of my work. And so when I started painting, I started doing these really large abstracts that involved my whole body, and perfection. It was very much more about the process of play over the product. And just my intention when I started was just getting kind of escaping my environment as a new mom and having struggling with postpartum depression. And over the years, I've grown and my children have gotten older and I'm out of that kind of mental state, I've been able to return to more illustrative work. And it's kind of a beautiful full circle in that my work is now really about being rooted in my environment and myself, instead of instead of painting being a way to escape it. So that's kind of about my work. I can actually start my presentation.
In your links as well, Meredith, for the chat, so that people can check out your work as you talk.
Oh yeah. Perfect. So yes, this is me and my two daughters, my youngest in the middle, and then my family. I grew up in the low country of South Carolina, so the coast is very it's very steeped in who I am and my work. But not coming out of an academic world and having started painting kind of on my own, having years, I had, 7 or so years since graduating school. I was kind of on my own in terms of starting this new path. And Instagram truly has been the reason I've been able to make a career. And so I'm really excited to talk to you guys. No matter what phase you're in your career, I just think we live in an age where you don't necessarily have to be in a certain place to make artwork for you, and to make a career out of it. So if we want to jump in, I think this is going to be kind of broad. So please don't be afraid to ask questions. I've kind of built this presentation as a starting off point, because I know everyone's experience with Instagram, or everyone has very different experiences, or different things work for different people. So this is kind of an umbrella that we can dig deeper into. But I will say there are a few things that are non-negotiables, and that is always making sure that or people know where to find you, and you're always kind of wanting to prove I'm a human, because I think the beautiful thing about the internet is it's so vast, but it is kind of easy to lose people as real people that they can contact. So always have your actual name, where you are, how to contact you, and how you sell your work, easily visible across all platforms. And then just in terms of growing, I think it's easy to get a little overwhelmed and angry at the fact that we always have to show up. But what I always tell people is that consistency is key, but consistency doesn't mean every day. Consistency doesn't always mean the same thing for every person. I think it's just committing to showing up in a way that works for you. So if you can log on once a week, but you do that over 5 years, that's consistency. So I think it's really, the thing we talk about it as artists a lot is it's just this, we kind of are chained to social media in terms of having the algorithm, everyone's always angry at the algorithm and having to keep up with the algorithm. But I think just when you approach it first, saying, what can I bring to the table, and not how can I keep up, but how do I make this work for me? It's a really helpful way to shift your approach just to your whole practice. So yes, and I put it's a marathon, not a race, which is so cliche, but it's very true. I think, especially in the way people land on your profile, when they can see that you have been doing something consistently over time, they're more likely to engage, because they can see that you're committed to your practice. And so another way to, once you kind of go in with that mindset of this is how I'm going to show up, it is crucial that you do keep up in terms of understanding how does this platform, and specifically Instagram in this case, how does it work? Because if you're doing, you can be making so much content, but if you're not putting it in the right places on the platform, it's very likely that you will not get the most bang for your time and effort. So the way I kind of think of my content is I I kind of put it in these categories of reels are the longest, they have the longest lifespan, and they're also the way you're most likely to introduce new followers to your work through reels, because that's what Instagram is showing to people who don't follow you. And so that's kind of where you can be a little experimental in terms of what's trending, what trends do fit for me, because not every trend works for every person. There are some things that I like, just I know does not feel right for me. So I or it doesn't feel like a good fit, or it feels forced. So I just like let it be. But then you'll come across something you see that you're like, oh, this is a fun trend. Let me do this in my own way. So I think that's kind of like a playground a little bit in terms of like how ways to create fun, engaging content. These are like not as likely to be shown to your aunt in Arkansas and your person you went to high school with. It's like, I think this is a little bit freeing for me to think about of like, I'm introducing myself to the world in reels. Like anyone, I can come across anyone's page with a reel more likely than I would be able to with a post or a story. And I think, again, just shifting your mind to, as an artist, I think it's hard because we're so close to the work, but remembering that it is a business in that you want to show your work to the world and maybe sell it. And it's not embarrassing to show your work. I think that's a hurdle for people of like, it feel like, who am I to be putting myself out here in this like awkward or unfamiliar way? But I just think it's so important to remember that your work is important because you're important, and your work is worthy of being seen because it is something that is created by you. And so I just think always remembering that like, there's value in showing up and showing work to someone. So posts have a shorter lifespan. I think posts are kind of having like they're having like a moment maybe of like how Instagram is utilizing these. I recently had a call actually with an Instagram person from like a content creator in like a content creator meeting. And they were saying, we only want to see carousels now. So, which is like when you're posting multiple pictures in one post, he's like, you always want to use music. So there are the kind of these things, it's helpful to keep up to date with like what Instagram is doing because it is always changing. And so, generally, they have a shorter lifespan. I think the way that your grid looks used to be like a whole thing of like, you want your profile to look super clean and tidy. That's not as important anymore. I think it's more you're focusing on each post. But generally speaking, I think of my grid or like my page when people land on my page. Maybe they see a reel of mine and they click on my name and they go to my page. I think of that part of Instagram as like kind of like my portfolio and my CV. If they had a baby, it's like a mini website. And I actually had an artist talk with another local artist last night, and she was saying, my Instagram is proof of my CV. Anyone can write anything on their CV. You're not going to put a picture on your portfolio, on your resume, but someone can easily go over your Instagram and be like, oh, this is that thing that I saw on her resume or CV. And now here it is. I can tell that she's like actually doing the work. Here it is. And she's with other people like she was at this event. So I think it is kind of like supplemental to these yeah, your website and how gallerists and collectors are kind of getting introduced to what you do generally. And then stories I think of as kind of like, these are my people. These are the people. It's one thing to follow someone. It's another for like their story to pop up on your feed every day. And if someone's watching your story, they are interested in who you are as a person. And so I think of my stories as like friends, maybe. Like it's a little bit less walking into a room of nobody you know, and it's like walking into a party where you like are familiar with some people and they are familiar with you, and you have more opportunity to have one-on-one conversations with people, whereas like walking into a big stadium, you don't. So I think you have a lot more freedom there to show like day-to-day things. This is what my studio looks like. This is what I'm working on this week. I went on this trip. I was inspired by this. It's kind of like a little scrapbook maybe, and a fantastic way to foster these connections that could turn into relationship, that can turn into opportunity. So your followers are trickling in, or you're starting to see a pickup now that you've been consistent, and now that you're showing up and utilizing the platform in the way that it was built to be used. But if nothing comes from, if you don't do anything else, you're maybe just like still kind of like a vague face to people. So I think building connections from your following is, I think of it as like kind of the next step. I try to make sure that no matter how many people you have following you, it could be 300, it could be 300,000. And of course, like the scale of that work in engaging is going to change the more people you have. But if someone is showing up on your page and doing the work to engage, it's so important to think of it as a real person, and treat every follower as a person that you can engage with. So I try to respond to especially every message. I try my best to respond to every comment in a really genuine way of saying, thank you so much for showing up, and like acknowledging the fact that I'm showing up. I think that doesn't, in the world where everything does feel fake and can be fake, I think there are still real ways that you can show humanity in this like online place. So, and I think that also everything goes back to, again, what did you commit to? How are you being consistent? That doesn't necessarily mean having to be on all the time to respond to every comment as it comes in. But like, let's say if you are the person that gets on once a week, we're making sure we're checking all of our boxes in terms of like, I'm responding to this comment, I'm posting this picture, so that again looks different for every person. And then show your support. It's, nobody exists in a vacuum, especially on social media. And I think the more that you engage with other people the way that you want to be interacted with, the more momentum you will see. I think of it as like going on a walk in a neighborhood. Like if you move in and you never leave your house, and you're like putting up a decoration for the season on the door, people have like an idea of who you are and what you're about. But until you walk across the street, and this is very Southern, maybe, but I'm realizing as I'm talking about this, but until you walk across the street, introduce yourself, have a conversation with that person, see what they're about, what do they do for a living, what interests them, you are kind of just existing with no one knowing what's going on around you. So yeah, I think I found that the more like free you are with support of others, I think that also just has an inadvertent way of coming back in terms of like you're like, everyone's being built up. So I love sharing other artists' work that inspires me. If you share other artists' work, always, always, always give the credit and tag them. But I think it's mutually beneficial when you're sharing work because you're showing, it's like sharing work. You're showing what you're inspired by. They're getting more visibility, but that might turn into a mutual connection where you're both engaging and following each other's work and you're learning about opportunities because of something that they posted and vice versa. So it really is, the connectivity of all of it is really kind of um, infinite when you think about all the different like connections that are to be made. And then lastly, I think, especially in terms of using Cohart, and I think Cohart has been so phenomenal at coexisting with these resources that already exist and where a lot of people are already seeing success. Cohart has done such a good job of coming alongside Instagram, for example, and making it easy for me to transfer those connections to making a sale on a different platform. And in a way that's been so helpful because in the past, I was doing all the correspondence if I were to sell a piece. And now it's like, oh, just look at this I have a little shop, click one link, shop there. And then this could turn into a whole pitch, but just making sure that consistency in terms of you're a real person who they're talking to, you are really selling work, you are always kind. When you say you're going to be somewhere or that you're going to email them, you email them. I think all of these things really add up. I just think like at the core of what I do, I guess I'm like always really trying to put the priority on how I show up when I'm interacting with a real person. Am I reliable and kind always? And I think especially on the internet, it's where we see a lot of that not happening. It goes a long way. I watched a dog. This is a side, but I watched that documentary, The Mind of a Dog, this week, and it talked about how like in no other species really you see like kindness win in terms of like evolution, but how like they're like, it's such a good example of like the wolf turned into a dog because they were kind and then the human gave them something and then just like down the line they turned into like a companion. But I just love that idea of like leading with kindness because it really does have this beautiful return in terms of a career. Okay, so now creating opportunities from online connections. So now that you've been consistent, you have followers, you're starting to get some like, I think for me, it was in my own experience, I was showing up for 4 years or so until I had a handful of reels get a lot of traction. And I used to say like, oh, I had a reel go viral. And that's, I had a huge spike in followers. I went from like 6,000 to 10,000 in like a weekend. And then I've kind of more consistently been building since then. And I used to say like, oh, that reel went viral. That's all it was. It's just, little old me. But really, when you think about what it takes for someone to see something that engages them, going to the profile, following, and then sticking around, it really is it's not that one piece of content you put out onto the internet. It's everything you have behind it to back it up, to show a bigger picture of what you're doing, where you want to go, what your priorities are, what your job is. So I think while that is such a beneficial aspect of social media, of like using a trend or using the algorithm in a way that works for you, we've all done it where we like see a funny video or a video that's incredible that an artist did, and you go to their profile and there's like really nothing else there. You don't know where they live. their website isn't up, or you just can't get a clear picture of what they're trying to give you. And so you don't follow. So I think, yeah, so that was kind of my path in terms of getting to where I am now. It is a real thing where it's like, as soon as people kind of see like, oh, there are other people following, it does lead to bigger opportunities, which is really cool. But I think the emphasis really always has to be on the work that you're consistently doing. So I think a really important way to think like future wise in terms of how to use your social media is that age old dressing for the job you want. So I'm kind of shameless about making sure that if I've applied for a show, I'm going to pin that same piece of art that I just applied with to the top of my page, so that if someone from a juror sees my application and then goes to my Instagram, they're like, oh, that's the painting. You know, it's like this, you're reinforcing what you want in this kind of like subconscious way, which seems, I don't know. I think I'm getting less and less embarrassed by just being really open with what I want. And that's hard as an artist. I think it's like you do sometimes feel like you should be a little mysterious or like not, I don't know. That doesn't work. In my experience, it doesn't work. You really have to like toot your own horn. I think Ashley Longshore posted this week, like when you toot your own horn, you get to decide how loud the volume is. And it's just so true. So if you want to work with a specific gallery, go to their page, see what artists they represent. How are those artists presenting their work? Like, how do you put yourself in the same category in a way that is true to your work and who you are? So I think constantly just learning from the industry, learning from galleries, learning from other artists, learning from Instagram and what's working for in Instagram. So yeah, I think in this, it's important to think first, what are my goals? And then how can I reinforce those goals on my online platform? And so I think too, like this idea of like, everyone's faking it until they make it. I think it's less about faking it, because you're already doing the work. Like when you're creating something, that's just as part of the process when you're on day one as it is when you're on day 1,025. So you're never faking it, but you can be ready for the opportunities when they get to you, because it's going to take time for opportunities to come. So what can you do to ready yourself? So when a brand reaches out, or a gallery reaches out, you've already been prepared for that moment, if that makes sense. And so building a network too with the people that you want to work with. I listened to a talk with an artist, Ty Nathan Clark, a few months ago, and he put it so plainly, and I just respected it so much, because like I was saying, there could be so much mystery around how to get into this world, especially if you're like me. I'm in Columbia, South Carolina, where it's, the closest like art scene to me is 4 hours away. So it's or more. So it can be so elusive trying to make these real connections to build your career when you're not like in the center of it. But he was just saying, like, I have a strategy of how I engage with galleries. I follow them. I engage with all of their work. I like every post. I comment once in a while, and then I wait. And every once in a while, they'll follow you back, and that's when you can DM them and say, that's when you start the conversation. It's like, oh, okay, I've seen you. Now you're seeing me. Now let's start a conversation. And of course, you're always doing that in a way that makes sense for you and is respectful of that person. But I just really liked his open approach to like, there is a strategy to this, and it's not all just luck, because I think that's kind of a myth that it's easy to like get really bogged down by. Um, so yeah, and in general, just, on social media and online, I mean, and in the real world, show interest in the opportunities that interest you. Don't be afraid to apply to shows. Don't be afraid to share the graphic that they say, that says like, I applied to this show or whatever. Like, don't be afraid to go for the things that you want to be involved in. Sign up for gallery emails. If I am on a lot of gallery lists. I'm not close to that gallery, but I'm signed up for their emails. I get to see the show when they announce the show, and I respond to the email, say, I love the show, like, great work, loved this piece. Engage in a way that you can from where you are. And I think in addition to that, showing up in your local network, big or small, is so crucial at every stage as well, to just connect with other artists, learn from other artists in your same area, and just and take advantage of like everything that your own community has, because I think it is kind of, the world is our oyster. The world is so much smaller now that we don't it's the art world is no longer driven purely by in-person connections, but in-person connections are still such a crucial part of growing as an artist. So yeah, I think that might be all I have. Have fun. I the social media can be like today, for example, I have deadlines. I had to wake up and tell myself, I don't need to like dress in a certain way to film a video today. I'm not going to post anything today. I just have to get the work done. It can feel like such this added thing where you're like, how am I supposed to make work and also make this video? But wait for when it does feel fun, and wait for when it does feel like an extension of your practice. How can I creatively show what I'm doing in a way that communicates my process? And I think that's kind of been my key of like just waiting until the inspiration strikes with this, just like I do with my paintings, because it's not always going to be there. It does go in waves of feeling like a burden, and then it goes in ways of feeling like, oh my gosh, I owe my entire career to this stupid app. So it yes, that's all I have, but I hope that was helpful, and I'm so excited and eager to hear feedback and questions, and I would love to hear y'all's experience too.
Thank you so much, Meredith. That was awesome. I think people are starting to drop some questions in the chat, but I just logged a couple that you were talking about, or that people brought up while you were chatting.
Great.
So we can start there. The first is just kind of like the Venn diagram of your humanity and your brand. Like, you talk a lot about your identity as a mother, but then also as a professional artist. Like, how do you think about balancing that on social? I know everyone here on the call has like their own personal world, right? And how much do you share of that to be authentic? And then also, what are the challenges of doing that?
That's a great question. It's kind of been a progression for me as a mom in particular. And honestly, it's been something that's kind of happened naturally. I've kind of shared less of my personal life as my studio moved out of my house. So I'm now doing the bulk of my work outside of my house. My kids are older and don't necessarily want to be on like taken. They don't want their picture taken of, or they don't want a video. So I very much respect that. And so it's been kind of this natural learning for me of like, what makes the most sense for like where I am now. And I'm not religious about anything in terms of like only showing art or like mixing 50-50. I think like, for example, I just went to Charleston for my kids' spring break, and and I posted in my stories about it, and I made a reel about it. And so I think I do I mix it in here and there, but it's, as my career's grown, I think the like life content hasn't been like as for like at the front.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's just hard to balance in general when you become professional anything, and then you're like, oh,
Right.
I do social media. Like,
Right. Yeah, there's no hard line anymore. Whereas I feel like there used to be kind of like, you don't social, or like, public and private things are very hard line. But now I think you just have to be honest with what works for you and what makes sense to share with your art. I think making sure your art is at the forefront if that's what you're prioritizing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had two questions about trends. So I think a lot of people are always curious how to find the trends, like how to ride with the wave of social media. Like you talk
Mm-hmm.
a lot about using it the way it was designed, and I'm curious to understand more about how you think through that process, and then also just really practically speaking, like what do you do to understand what's on trend, and how do you
Mm.
kind of like ride that wave to be most effective?
Yeah. So I think you can kind of think of trends in two separate ways. There are trends like the like real trends, like REEL, that come and go so quickly. So I hop on those every once in a while, in terms of like there was one last week, it's probably already over. That was like this and whatever. Like, and then it was like a video of something they love, and then it's like, like this and yapping or whatever. Like I don't just like these little funny kind of quickly flash in a pan trends that I utilize when it like makes sense to me. I never feel like I force it, but I'm like, oh, I could, that makes sense for what I'm doing. But then I think I there's also this overarching idea of a trend of like how people largely are presenting their work. Like for example, I think you're seeing, I'm trying to think right now, like I think now like overall there's like a casualness that's coming back to social media at large, whereas it got super tailored and super bright and sunny and everything was perfect, and now I think we're skewing back towards more real content, or like more, I think it's just as curated, but now it's curated to not look curated. um but I think just paying attention overall, like if you spend 15 minutes on your For You page and scrolling through people's reels, like what's the overall feel? Is it silly and like funny, and are people like super cinematic? And then what best fits you, I guess. I don't know if that is helpful
Yeah, I
or
think that makes
if that
sense.
answers the question, but
Yeah, I think some people have mentioned, yeah, paying attention to big creators, but like, I think just going on it, right? Like you talked a lot
Mhm.
about engaging with the community and seeing what's happening. Like, I think that you have to kind of give before you receive, so to speak. So maybe
Mm.
going in there and dabbling yourself is part of the way to keep your finger on the pulse.
Right. And actually, a good example, I think you're kind of seeing both right now of like, there are people like there's an artist in Paris. Her name's Tiffany Buell. I don't know if I'm saying her last name right, but her content is like highly stylized, highly art directed, beautiful, beautiful content. Like the content is just as much the work as the painting itself. And then, so as a creator, I see her stuff, and my initial reaction is, oh crap, can I do that? Like, I don't know if I can do that. That takes a dedicated space and like a nice camera and all. So it's like, I think it's using your own discernment of like, she's doing this amazing thing. It's working so well for her. And I think these highly stylized, directed kinds of creators are doing really well right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean I need to pivot my entire strategy to do exactly that. But I can take elements of that in the way that I create. Like from that, I can think, oh, people are responding to highly stylized content. They're also really responding to very low brow, super casual content. So where do I fit into those? I think is kind of how I
Yeah,
approached it.
that makes total sense. I also think just the way you talked about reels versus stories versus posts is really helpful in terms of format
Mm.
for artists because you can be so experimental on stories. And then with reels, that's how you'll reach new people. And with your posts, that's really like your portfolio and your CV. Like, so I think framing it in that sense and then thinking about trend integration within each three of those three buckets is helpful as well.
Yeah, definitely.
A really great question from Patrizia. I don't know, Patrizia, if you want to jump in and say hi, but she's from Malta, tiny island, and she's talking about using the right hashtags. And I think that kind of goes to what you were talking about being 4 hours away from the closest art scene. Like, we're all in different parts of the world. Like, how do you really reach the right audience? Are hashtags still relevant? Like, do you still use hashtags? And how do you think about popping up in front of people based on where they are geographically?
So I don't know like I don't know if this is a completely right answer, but I kind of feel like hashtags are one of those things. They're never going away. I think it is definitely like I think it's how Instagram learns what people are interested in and what content to push. I I don't know if they're being used in the same way as they used to. Whereas like I used to save a hashtag and I'd follow a hashtag so that those things would come up for me. I don't know if that is still if hashtags are still directed towards the consumer or if they're more helpful for like the actual developers. But to answer your question, I think it's helpful to like look at other artists that are doing well and the other artists that you admire and how are they doing it? Are you seeing like a huge shift in how hashtags are being used? Or are you kind of seeing a mixture? I kind of wait for things like when there's like a big change, like I think for a minute people were doing instead of doing hashtags, they were just like putting in words with no hashtag at the bottom of their post and kind of seeing how far that would take their post. And I'm not really seeing that anymore. So I never started doing that. I think it's okay to like take a beat and be like, is this what we're all doing? So that probably wasn't helpful, but my answer is I don't know. And I use them sometimes and I don't others. And I know that if I do know at one point, if you were using the same block of hashtags for every post, Instagram would push it, it would like tamp your post because then it thought you were a bot. So you're wanting to like write content that is like not duplicated, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember there was a moment when everyone was like tagging Picasso or Dolly or like Sotheby's, because that was sort of how you were getting visibility. And I think that they
Yes. And Instagram was like, no.
changed
Yeah.
that. Like, no, no. Okay, let's see. Bria, you have two great questions. Do you want to jump in quickly and ask them? Let's see where Bria is.
Hello.
Yes. Okay.
Hi.
Perfect.
Yeah, sorry. I guess first question, maybe I'll start with the one about when you were starting out. How much did you share like the different styles that you were experimenting with before you found the direction that you're going in now, or was it just sort of a natural progression? I'm not sure how much to share of my like random experiments.
That's a great question. And I definitely I shared it all from the very beginning. Um, and I don't know that there's any harm in that. I think especially when you're figuring out, it's such an exciting thing as a follower to see someone like to see the progression and to see the breakthroughs. So yeah, that's my own advice would be to just to show it. I think show it in a way that is in line with what's like working and like it's good photography or good videos, and the quality's, I think like stay in line with how you present it, but I think absolutely present it, because I think a connection a gallery that passes you over today can look back 3 years from now, and you apply again in 3 years and be able to see she's still at it. Look at the amount of work and the amount of like openness she's had in her process. So I think it's valuable at every stage.
Yeah, okay, that's great. I'm very new.
Yeah.
And I have an existing business in something completely different.
Okay.
But a similar background to you in graphic design.
Hmm.
I didn't type this in the chat, but maybe this is helpful for other people too. Like I have it's not huge following, but like several thousand people.
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth, if I feel like I don't know if I want to return to that business, maybe shifting that Instagram into my art Instagram, or I should start a new one completely?
That's a great question. And I would say just from I would say there's so much, like, you've already created this network of people who know who you
Yeah.
are. I don't think I think I would probably continue with that and just rebrand. Everyone loves a
Yeah.
rebrand. I think there's no shame in that. And I think there are people that are going to be like, cool, I'm on board. And there are people that are like, this isn't what I said before, but like, but you've done so much work already to harness this like kind of community. And I think it would be a loss to start all over with people who don't know you at all. Yeah. I think
I also don't want to manage more than one Instagram.
no, I think there's no shame in shifting.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Last question. Sorry.
No, you're great.
Do you have any tips for like filming your process or sharing your work when you don't have a great setup? Like I work out of my dining table. I have a little office corner, but I have to put it away every day.
Mhm.
And the light is pretty inconsistent. I'm in the West Coast, so it's rainy a lot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was honestly a huge reason why I wanted to get a space outside of my house, because it is such, I did that for so many years. But I think I bought one of those canvas lights. It's like a really great tripod for your iPhone that it took a lot of the headache of the setup away. And I think it's hard for me. It was hard for me to like initially invest in things like that. But I do think when you kind of have a system for your setup, it does take the guesswork out of like every time you want to create.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. You don't have to set up an entire photo shoot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, using and like waiting for when there is natural light and but that I can second that. That's a challenge. But I think doing the best with what you have right now, even if that does mean only filming when the light's perfect, I think that's totally fine.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one other question that has come up is just thinking about some like the tactical tips and tricks. So like ideal length of a video, when is it too long? Also something in your presentation that you talked about was like being ready when they come. And I'm curious, like doing high-res photography shoots, like what are some of those things that you've done in advance, or just kind of have like set up as foundational and best practices that you follow that you think would be helpful for the group?
Yes. So I definitely think always, this should have been in the presentation because this is very important. The quality of this content you share, just in terms of like basics of like making sure it's not blurry, making sure you can like the composition is right. Those things really do matter in terms of people wanting to engage with your content. It's going to draw an eye better if there's nothing distracting. So I use my phone for 95% of my content. Every couple years, I'll have like a photographer shoot the body of work that I've done, and I'll use those photos for years of like for submissions and for, I make sure I have like an updated headshot. But in the day-to-day creating content, I think you don't have to have anything insane to make good content. I think it's more important to have clear images and, yeah, like I said, good composition and things like that. So does that answer that question?
Yeah, I think so. And then just anything around like ideal length of video,
Oh,
like
right.
about that.
That I think that's kind of in we're kind of in a limbo with that too. I know both like TikTok and Instagram just to introduce like longer format videos. And so I don't know that I do kind of a mixture. I don't know that there's a benefit. Like, I think if you're just have the phone facing you and it's just a talking head for 5 minutes, nobody's going to watch that. But I think there's a lot of leeway depending on what you're showing.
Yeah, I think also something about social media, which is really interesting, is that there are feedback loops. And so you can experiment and then try out different formats.
Yes.
And then whoever's getting the most hits, you basically have a data feedback loop.
Yes. Yeah. Insights. I don't live and breathe by my insights. If you go, everyone, like on your front page, there's like, it'll say like, go to my insights panel if you have a business account. And I would recommend everyone switching from a personal account to a business account, because you do get these like business insights that show exactly that, how long someone watched a specific reel versus how long someone's watching your content overall. The insights are really powerful. And and I know some artists that like they like really nerd out on all the insights and like find it so interesting. And so I use them kind of as like a template, but not a prescription.
Yeah, that's the right way to think about social media in general. All right, well, we have about 5 minutes left, Meredith, so I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. You've given so much helpful and so many insightful tips and tricks, and also some like really big perspective widening thoughts on how to use Cohart, or sorry, how to use Instagram as an artist and how it can help you push forward your business and your career. I'm just curious, like if you were to zoom out a little bit and think about, Instagram as a whole and social media, like I think a lot of us get tired of it and fatigued, using it. But when you think about the positive aspects and kind of just words of advice for fellow artists, that are in it together, like what would you kind of highlight as some of the key things that are important to remind yourself of as you use it and go back to it, and just maybe any stories that you have that have been really positive about the platform, or about social media for your career that you think might inspire other people on the call.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is it's given me a voice where I don't know that I would have one if it was 15 years ago, in terms of like being able to, like, these brands reaching out and being like, I want to license your artwork. Like that just would have, that there wouldn't have been a way for that to happen. So I think it's so encouraging, because it really makes the world so much smaller. And through Cohart, I've sold work to people in Dubai. Like it's just like mind boggling when you think about connecting with someone on another continent through like your phone. And I think like it's beneficial to I don't know. I just think I try not to take that for granted, because it really is such a cool gift. I think also it's so important. I mean, the apps are designed to make you addicted to them. So you're like constantly, it's like an abusive relationship a little bit. It's like, I mean, maybe that's too strong, but it's just like the app doesn't care about you. So, but the connections that you make on the app are very real, and a career can be built from it. So I think it's just so important to remember, like, make the app work for you, but don't work, like, sell your soul to the app. In terms of like, I mean, I struggle so much with just constantly opening, constantly feeling like I need to be engaged. Like I am very much a victim of like this dopamine. I get ads all the time for like, are you addicted to dopamine? I'm like, yes, I very much am. So you're working with something that actually can be very like challenging. But I think when you set up yourself for success in terms of like going back to the beginning of like, how can I consistently show up in a way that's beneficial to me in my everyday life, not just like my online life, I think it can be great. So yeah, I have very like polarizing opinions, but overall, I really owe my career to social media. And I think that's not something artists could say just a short time ago.
Yeah, I think that that's the key takeaway is it's a powerful tool. It is giving
Yes.
a voice, and don't be afraid to express your voice and your own vision and
Yes.
boundaries, like make sure that
Right. Yes, absolutely.
yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Meredith. This has been an incredible conversation, and thank you for everyone for joining the call. We will send a recap, a recording with all of Meredith's tips, the presentation, and if anyone has further questions, we'll make sure that her contact information is in the email as well as ours. And again, this is an ongoing dialogue, and so we're excited to just keep the conversation open, keep learning from each other, and we just appreciate everyone jumping on and being respectful and participatory. And yeah, thank you so much, Meredith, for your time.
Thank you. And don't be afraid to please send me a DM, and I would love to like actually say hi and thank you for coming. And yeah, thanks so much for having me.
I'm gonna put Meredith's IG back in at the end here so you can follow her and DM her. And then we're going to be doing some more webinars over the next couple weeks with fellow artists on topics like branding, email newsletters, and bringing in some collectors as well to talk about how collectors think and how they think about value and when to purchase art, so that we can kind of break that down too. So stay tuned for more webinars from us. And if you have more topics as well that you're looking for, please let us know. Lauren, are we all good then? Do we need anything else? Any other questions that we missed?
No, we're all good. I just popped in a link to our full event calendar. So we have already some couple final slots for April and then a big May lineup. And as Kendall said, we're adding more every day. We're in some kind of final conversations with some guest speakers. So keep your eye on the calendar. We'll keep you posted. And if you have a topic that you're passionate about that you'd love to share with the community, please reach out, get in touch with us at Cohart, because we would love to feature more voices like Meredith. Thank you so much, Meredith, for your time today. It was really insightful and really great to have this feeling of community here on this chat.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy your evenings and afternoons. Thank you.